that leads up to Noah's flood. As we were talking last week, of course, the world had become extremely corrupt. We talked about that. And we talked about the fact that Noah exclusively found grace in the eyes of the Lord, Genesis 6, verse 8. Sometimes we think that we're sort of struggling in an extreme minority. And I think it is true. Those who are on the straight and narrow way that leads to heaven, Jesus said, are a minority in Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. But however small the minority may be, it's not as little as it was in the days of Noah. You talk about one man and his family who were trying to live for God, and no one else, literally no one else. It's amazing. And so we have to admire Noah. Furthermore, we have to admire Noah in regards to his acceptance of the job that was assigned to him. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, it says, by faith, Noah prepared the ark. So Noah believed God and he acted. Look at that verse for just a minute. There's something that we ought to maybe, I suppose it'd be a little bit speculative, but first of all, read Hebrews 11, verse 7. It says, by faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. What do you think it means there where it says that Noah was warned by God, or warned of God, about things not seen as yet? What was not seen as yet? Maybe rain. Certainly a flood of that magnitude had never been seen since. And so when God said, I'm going to destroy the world with a flood, Noah would have had nothing to say, okay, yeah, that will be bad. Because I remember last time it happened, it was really bad. He didn't have anything like that to compare it to. So the flood itself, but I think what Gordon said is some interesting speculation. Go back to chapter 2, Genesis 2. In Genesis 2, it says verse 5, every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground, but there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. All right, so at that point, it hadn't rained yet. But that suggests a different natural system than exists in our world today. In our world today, it rains, right? At least we hope it rains. We hope it rains today. But in our world, it rains. That's how plants are sustained. You don't have rain, you don't have plants. You don't have rain, you have a desert, right? What was happening there was different. A mist, notice it says there, a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And so this wasn't just in an isolated spot. This was apparently global. Now, that being the case, I don't think anything has changed. There's nothing that would indicate that operational system, that natural system, changed from there until the flood. There's no indication that it did. There wouldn't be any reason to suspect that it did. And so maybe, as Gordon said, when it says Noah was warned of God of things not seen as yet, not only a flood of immense magnitude, but possibly even the idea that it could rain. I think there's a great probability that Noah had never seen it rain, or anybody else had ever seen it rain for that matter. So, you're Noah. And God says, okay, it's going to rain. It's going to rain a lot. And there's going to be a flood that's going to cover the whole earth. How are you going to react to that? Don't you think a lot of people would have said, come on, that can't be. It's impossible. That could never happen. It won't ever. If that won't happen, I don't have to do anything. That won't happen. But Noah had faith that even though he was being warned of things he had never seen or experienced before, he moved with fear and prepared an ark. Noah was a great man of faith. Monty?
We know that Noah was a preacher of righteousness, and he was preaching to other people about this upcoming judgment. He had to have been telling them it's going to start raining and we're going to have a flood. So you said, you know what Noah's people have said. You know, people have probably said something. It's never rained. What's this rain business?
You're crazy.
You know, so obviously nobody else believed. There was only the 8 of them on the ark.
Okay. So in proclaiming this message, he would have been proclaiming something that other people are just they're going to brand him. Noah, you are some kind of crazy fanatic, because that's just not going to happen. We don't believe it. So here today, we preach God's impending judgment, right? We believe that God in the future will send a judgment upon the earth. And there are a lot of people in the world today who say, you're crazy. It'll never happen. I don't even believe there is a God. So, you know, I don't think it's to the same extent for us as it was for Noah, but there's still some of that. People don't believe the warnings, and anybody who sounds the warning is going to be considered a fanatic, oddball, weirdo. Tom?
Noah had something very, we don't have. He had people that were, pretty much alive from almost the beginning, that he could go back and ask.
Ever seen it rain?
Rain? I mean, you got Methuselah, who was what, 960 something?
He was 969 the year the flood came.
So he could go back and ask.
Almost 1,000 years.
Almost 1,000 years. I heard it's going to rain. Something, water's going to come down from the sky. And, Methuselah, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
But then, there were those that, had heard of God. There was indication that even Methuselah believed in God to some extent.
Yeah. I think Methuselah, I think that lineage of Enoch, Lamech, Methuselah is probably a faithful lineage. And my thinking is, and you've heard me teach this before, but I think Methuselah died the year the flood came. I don't think he died in the flood. I think he died and the flood came by prophecy. But Methuselah, I think that lineage from Enoch we know was a faithful man. Methuselah was his son, then Lamech, then Noah. We talked last week, right at the end of our class, about the enormous magnitude, the size of this ark in Genesis chapter 6, verse 15. The length of it shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. Now, conservatively, we know that a cubit was from the elbow to the tip of the finger. That was the measure of a cubit. It would be different for every man, right? But conservatively, we estimate a cubit at 18 inches. I think Monty said when they went up to see the Ark exhibit, they went something a little over 20. But look at those dimensions. It just take 18, take a foot and a half. So if it's 300 cubits long, 300 times 1.5, 450 feet long. That's a football field and a half long. And then the width of it's 50 times 1.5 is 75 feet across. And the height of it was 30 cubits, 30 times 1.5 is 45 feet tall. Enormous vessel. And some of you have seen that Ark exhibit up in northern Kentucky, and it is enormous. And you got to think about Noah. You build this, you have no modern equipment at all. You don't have... Yeah. So here's Noah going like this, and trying to measure his board. Maybe he could have cut a stick, I suppose. But really, by our estimation, I mean, can you imagine I can't imagine taking on that job, period, even with all the things that are available to us. Think about Noah taking that on without any of the kind of equipment that we would employ to get the job done. I remember when they announced they were going to build that Ark exhibit up in northern Kentucky, and it was 2, 3, 4 years in construction, even at that, with modern equipment. We said, and we said last week, go back to verse 3 of Genesis 6, the apparent indication that God said, I'm going to send this judgment, but it's going to be 120 years from now. Very likely could have taken Noah that long to build the ark. Now I've seen a couple hands. Wait.
No, it may not be that important, but I've seen some things recently that may suggest that there were actually different size cubits where you read, but, there may have been a Roman cubit and an Egyptian
Yeah,
cubit,
yeah.
but they were different sizes, and so it may not be the 18-inch cubit that we think of is the cubit that he actually used.
And we don't
But it would
know
still
for
be a
sure.
massive thing.
We don't know for sure. Monty said when they, for some reason, they deducted, or their conclusion when they built that ark exhibit was that a cubit would be something a little over 20 inches. So, but I think in fact, my guess is that my cubit would be more than 18 inches right there. But that's what we understand is how they judged a cubit. What is interesting, no matter how you judge that cubit in its length, the proportions, length to width to height, are right. And you could use a cubit of an inch, or you could use a cubit of 10 feet, but if you built it to that proportion, it would float. It would float good. A very stable, and even to this day, they build ocean-going vessels to those proportions because it's stable. It's sort of self-righting. It's almost impossible to capsize that. When we talked about the ark last week, we talked about the fact that, always when you see a picture of the ark, and when you see this ark exhibit up in northern Kentucky, it's like a boat, and it's got rounded ends and a bow and a stern, and that's the way we vision it. There wouldn't have been any reason to make it like that. All this thing had to do was float. It didn't have to go anywhere. It just had to float. And so probably more realistically, this thing was more like just a big flat barge. All it had to do was float. And so, the picture we have in our mind's eye of Noah's Ark, probably not very good. It was probably a little different than that. To see another hand. Dale, did you? Well, like a barge on the river has a sloped front because they want it to go somewhere. They want it to push through the water. But this barge wouldn't have even had to do that. Right? Monty?
I've read that according to those ratios that the ark was built on, that in a big wave it could have rolled up 90 degrees on its side and it would have come back level after the wave went under it. So, if you look at different proportions, and I've read where they even had a thing in the exhibit up there in Kentucky about different shapes that different mythologies in the world have used to describe something like that. But all of them in those type of seas would have sunk or come apart. They wouldn't have been self-supporting. But with the size and height and width ratios that this one has that is described in the Bible, that in a big way it could go on its side even as much as 90 degrees and then come back down right.
Yeah. So very stable. And Noah wouldn't have known that. Noah wouldn't have had any concept of what would be a stable craft, but God's wisdom revealed it to him. And so huge job. We're kind of repeating some stuff we talked about last week, but it's such an inspiring story. And the key expression there right at the end of chapter 6 is, "Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he." That is an amazing statement. I tell you, when you and I die, if it could be said of us, if we could even get close to that, and he did according to all that God commanded him, so did he. That'd be a wonderful epitaph, all right? It couldn't be any better. So Noah was really an incredible man of faith. So let's dig in a little bit further here. We'll read the first few verses of 7, although a lot of it is repeating information we already had in 6. Chapter 7, verse 1, "The Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. And every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female, of fowls of the air by sevens, the male and his female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him." Now we make the point sometimes, I know when we quiz the kids up here in our children's Bible drill, we say, how many animals on the ark? 2 of every kind. I think that's the easy answer in almost everybody. If you ask people on the street who not really Bible students, how many of each kind of animal did Noah put on the ark? Everybody'd say two of every kind. And that's true, but there were some that there were more. It's kind of interesting that in verse 2, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens. Well, we haven't heard anything about clean beasts so far in Genesis. We don't know what is a clean beast, what's an unclean beast. That hasn't been revealed to us in the scripture, but it obviously was known by Noah. There was some indication of what was clean and what was unclean. Now that's obviously, we don't get full information about that till we get to the law of Moses, right? Until God gives the law to Moses on Sinai, then he's going to spell out what identifies a clean and unclean beast. But Noah obviously knew, because he proceeded, verse 5 says, to do what God commanded him to do. So he understood the distinction between a clean and unclean. Gordon.
You know, we'll learn later that we kind of understand that Noah and all animals are vegetarian.
Yeah, we don't believe that. We don't believe they were carnivores yet.
I can believe, gave them permission to eat.
Yeah, I don't think men were eating meat at this juncture. And that will come, as you say, after the flood. We'll read about that. Wade?
So do you think that men were held responsible as far as what was clean and what was unclean from this point until they gave the law?
I don't know. We don't know.
Because the Sabbatarians try to use the same argument for the Sabbath. Because there in Genesis 1, where he said he made the Sabbath holy.
The seventh day, yeah.
Seventh day.
Yeah.
They try to use the same argument and say, well, look, this was done in Genesis 1. But really, it doesn't come to fruition until...
The law, right. The law regulating that doesn't come into existence until Moses' time. And he gave the law. I think you're right.
So I'm not sure he actually...
We don't know. We honestly don't know. You know, we don't know, because I think, like Gordon said, the idea that men would eat meat, I don't think came about until Genesis 9. When we get after the flood, he's going to give men, I think, authority to eat animal flesh. This, though, clean and unclean, was before that. So, so when he gave them authority to eat flesh, we'll talk about that when we get to Genesis 9. Did he at that point say, don't eat pigs? I'm telling you, don't eat pigs and don't eat catfish. Or did he... we know that came to pass in the law of Moses. We don't know before that. Tom?
So, if you go back to a couple lessons back, God gave certain instructions. You read in Hebrews that, Abel offered a acceptable sacrifice by faith. So the faith came by hearing by the word of God. And God specified to Abel what kind of sacrifice to make.
Apparently he did.
We know that he was, that he was a keeper of flocks, and the flocks that they kept were, sheep and goats and things like that. So God, gave some instruction to him that is sort of a foundation to go back what God accepted as clean and unclean.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Abel could have offered any type of animal except what he offered by faith, and that faith is something that flows.
There was some revelation there that we don't have written down. Yeah. Okay. All right. Got a question for you. You're going to gather up all these animals? I'm assigning you. Gather up at least 2 of every kind. By the way, it's interesting that, I'm not prepared to go into this, but the classifications of animals. So, there's a lot of kind of cows. There are Angus cows, and Roger's got Holstein cows, and there are Hereford cows. And did he have to have 2 of every kind of cow? Every type of cow. Did he have to have 2 of every type? Well, we know that our modern cows are the product of what we call animal husbandry. We know that we have bred cows for special characteristics. Roger's cows are bred to give lots of milk. Angus cows are bred to give a good kind of beef to eat. And so we know that he didn't have to give it. No, there's how many hundreds, maybe thousands of different breeds of dogs are there? Well, again, a lot of the dogs we have today have come about through selective breeding practices, even in recent years. He didn't have to bring every kind. They would begin to make subspecies after the flood. We've done an analysis. I can dig that out again. It might be fun to do that again. Dig that out and go through a sort of a mathematical calculation. Could Noah have put all those kind of animals on the ark? I don't know if you remember a lesson we did along that line a while back. And the answer is pretty easily yes, because you've got to judge what it means, two of every the male and every female. Someplace in here, I think it says kind or anyway, the rules of genetic, or what do I want to call it, biology, taxonomy, the different types that would have had to be there in order to preserve all alive is an interesting study in itself. And those who've studied it say Noah could have definitely done that. But my question to you is, he got 7 days to do this. Okay, I got to get a lion. I got to get an elephant. I got to get a giraffe. I got to get 2 giraffes. I got to have dinosaurs, because we think the dinosaurs were on the ark too, right? We think the dinosaurs became extinct after the flood. I got to have 2 dinosaurs, 2 of maybe different kinds of dinosaurs. How am I going to get all that in 7 days? You know, some of us have been on hunting trips, and in 7 days you don't get much at all. If you went out west, Monty's been out west hunting. Monty, I want you to get, I'm going to give you 7 days, and I want you to get 2 elk, a bull and a cow elk, and you got 7 days to do it. Would you be absolutely certain you could do that in 7 days? That's right. 7 days would be a challenge just to get that animal. How did Noah do that in 7 days? Roger? I think we're going to read after the flood that God put the fear of man in animals after the flood. I think that's right. What else, Monty?
Verse 9, it says 2 by 2. They went into to Noah, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. And then again in verse 15, it says, and they went into the ark to Noah. So I believe that God sent the animals to Noah that he wanted on the ark.
I think that's right. Verse 9 and verse, what was it, 15. I think that, I mean, it's not, if we believe in an all-powerful God, we don't have to, it's not a stretch of the imagination to say he could have caused those animals to come to Noah to enter the ark. Follow-up question on that. Okay, so there's a lot of animals. I mean, it's a big boat, and there's a lot of animals in it. How are you going to feed those animals? We're going to talk here in a little bit. They were on the ark for over a year. How are we going to feed those animals and keep them watered and have all the provisions necessary to take care of them? Now, he was instructed to take some food types onto the ark, but notice verse 21 of chapter 6 says, take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. So he did take some food stores on the ark. I'm going to tell you, this take a lot of food for being on the ark for over a year. How did he manage that? Wade?
So there's some things that you have to take into consideration. First of all, God didn't say how big the animals had to be.
They could have been babies. It could have been baby elephants.
They could have all been babies, and so they're not going to eat that much. Secondly, when you put animals in a dark, confined area, remember there's only one window in the ark that we know about, right?
Yeah, it says in chapter 6, verse 16, a window shalt thou make to the ark.
Yeah, so there's only been, so it would have been dark most of the year, and so animals kind of hibernate,
Yeah.
so they don't have to be seen as much as they would have if they'd been out in the light and been active. And plus, that's another thing, they're not active, they're in small, confined places. But not only do you have to consider that, you also have to consider what their waste products.
Yeah.
You have to get rid of the waste products.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not just cut and dry.
It's not cut and dry. But I do think I think your 2 points are well taken. One is these didn't have to be full-grown, mature animals. I mean, an elephant, is big. But I don't have to take a full-grown elephant. I got to take a male and a female. So I could reduce the size that way. I do think that they could have almost naturally gone into an almost hibernative state, or God could have miraculously caused them to go into hibernative state. Don't forget, we're still dealing with a miraculous God here who could have caused that. So again, I think it's all feasible, and especially feasible when you factor in God's miraculous power.
But it also, you remember when Elisha told the widow, bring me all these cups, and then all this oil appeared in all this, or even with Jesus, they kept giving out, wine, and he could have done the same thing.
Exactly.
He could have just miraculously
Caused the food.
And we'll just keep, just like the bread or the fish, and they were handing out continuously.
Yeah. One thing that Wade brought up this kind of makes me think about the window. We're backtracking. Go back to chapter 6, verse 16. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. Now, first of all, when you see a picture that men draw of the ark, it almost never has just one 18-inch square window, which probably would have been not adequate by terms of ventilation. But notice the way it's worded. It's a window, and you finish it in a cubit above. So it was a cubit high window, but it doesn't say how wide it was. And so I'm wondering, I couldn't prove this, my life depended on it, but I'm wondering if there was a window around the ark, like a ventilator window that went all the way around under the covering of the roof to vent it out. It's possible, because I think it's a little bit weird the way that's worded. It just gives one dimension. It gives the height dimension, but not width. Sarah?
Well, in chapter 7, verse 8, verse 6, he talks about Noah opening the window.
Yeah.
The window was closed.
Yeah. It was obviously something that could be opened and closed as needed. You would think during the height of the storm you would have it closed whatever it was, however big it was. So yeah, it was somehow could be manipulated, whatever this window was. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Noah knew, and again, what you have to conclude is Noah had more information than we have recorded here, because he went about to do it and did it exactly the way he was supposed to do it. And so the fact that men, when they try to draw the ark, draw it in all different fashions, indicates we don't have the full blueprints here. Noah did. Noah knew exactly what God wanted and did it exactly as he was asked to do it. All right, let's keep reading a little bit further here in chapter 7. So we pick up the reading, verse 6. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons and his sons' wives with him into the ark, because of the waters of the flood, of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean, of fowls and of everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in two and two into Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the selfsame day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind. There's the word kind, by the way. And every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went into Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all the flesh wherein is the breath of life. And they went in, male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lifted up above the earth. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceeding upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. All right, let's stop there for a minute. So again, Noah, great man of faith, obedient in every way. Our author asks us about where did the water come from? Well, obviously it rained. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, right? Say that happened now. It rained for 40 straight days. You know, there are some places on earth where that still probably comes close to happening. You ever read about the monsoons in the Far East, the monsoon season? It rains every day for 40 days or more. I mean, they have rain and rain and rain and rain. In the Pacific Northwest, my guess is that you could probably find seasons of the year out there where you get rain on 40 consecutive days. It rains all the time. Would 40 days and 40 nights of rain be enough to cover all the earth in water and cover the mountains? How high is Mount Everest? Mount Everest is over 27,000 feet tall. If it rained...
I think the earth went through a real big change.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, mountains are high points maybe. And so, also, we talked about the canopy around here. That was destroyed too.
Okay. Gordon's got us on the right track here. First of all, I don't think 40 days and 40 nights of rain is going to cover Mount Everest. Because it says, apparently, the way I read that is that the water was at least 15 cubits deep everywhere. Obviously, some places deeper, but at a minimum, 15 cubits. So 15 cubits is like 22 and a half feet, at least over 20 feet. In its shallowest place, the earth was covered with at least 20 feet of water. I'll tell you, it can't rain that much. It just can't rain enough to do that if we're looking at the earth as it is today. Rain wouldn't have accomplished that. But notice what Gordon said, I think, is right. It says in verse 11 is a key verse. It says, this. First of all, verse 10 says, it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were on the earth. Verse 12. Verse 12 is the 40 days and 40 nights of rain. But verse 11, it says, the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. All right, now, think back to the way we've been describing planet Earth pre-flood. Planet Earth pre-flood. We believe there was this water vapor canopy that enveloped the earth. Remember back in Genesis 1, one of the early things that God did is He separated the waters that were below the firmament from the waters that were above the firmament in Genesis chapter 1, verse 7. The firmament is the atmosphere. There was water above the atmosphere. This would make the water vapor canopy that we have described. That would cause the earth to have what? Like a greenhouse environment all over. From pole to pole, the earth would have been in like a greenhouse. That's why it wouldn't need to rain, because the moisture would just come up and water the plants. We got a greenhouse here. We got a very powerful greenhouse environment going on. But now, God causes that. It's not here now. We don't have that now, right? And so at some point in history, that water vapor canopy came down. I think it's here. I think that expression, the windows of heaven were open, that water vapor canopy collapsed. A lot of water going to come from that. But there's also another very key expression. The fountains of the great deep were broken up. There was subterranean water, huge subterranean water reservoirs, and they were blasted out. They expelled the water. Water came from above and water came from below, and it flooded the earth. There's a lot of water. Now we got another problem. The next problem is, if you got everything covered at least 20 feet deep, where's it going to go? There's no place to run off to, right? If the whole earth is covered in water, now, water runs from high ground to low ground, right? There is no high ground. Everything's underwater. Where's it going to go? Well, I think that expression, the fountains of the great deep were broken up, that describes violent geological activity that was taking place in conjunction with the flood. And I believe what Gordon was hinting at, I believe that suggests the thrusting up of high mountain ridges and the carving out of deep ocean basins. Now you have got high ground. And you've got some place for the water to run to as it runs off into the deep ocean basins. So the question is, where did the water go that was in the flood? And the answer is, it's still here. It's still here. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't go off into space somewhere. It's still here. But the earth looks much, much different now than it did before. Sarah?
I think, and you might agree, I think Psalm 104, verses 6 through 9 is right now.
Go ahead, read that.
It says, "Thou dost cover it with the deep as with the garment, the waters were standing above the mountains. As I rebuked, they fled. At the sound of thy thunder, they hurried away. The mountains rose, the valleys sat down. The place where thou hast established them, thou hast set a boundary, that they may not pass over, that they may not return to cover the earth."
Exactly right. Give that reference again.
Psalm 104, 6 through 9.
Psalm 104, 6 through 9. That'd be a good one to write in your margin. Psalm 104, 6 through 9. Tom?
None of the things that science presents out there. And you've probably all seen pictures of the earth that they take it and move the continents together, twisted, and show how they almost fit together and form like
it's one solid landmass.
Solid landmass. And then they believe over billions of years, this continental shift has gone through and done it because they've had to have that timeline for it. And they still go through and measure the continental shifts, through things and seismic activity. And so that's how they come up with their concept of how long it really took. Because in our time to record it and measurement, that now that we have astrological measuring satellites and things, we can actually calculate how much the continents move over a period of time. So science says, okay, if it's moving 1 millimeter a year, that it would take X number of years for Europe to separate from from North America.
Now, that notion is called uniformitarianism. In other words, that, and so it's a flawed notion, but people approach it and say, well, the processes that we see on Earth today are the processes that have always been. And so, like you say, if we measure continental shift and it moves that much in 100 years, then it would take 400 million years for it to move as far as we think it's moved. And so, but they're judging that based upon the idea that things have always been as they are now. And that is a mistake. This passage, although it's not a lot of information, this passage is describing catastrophic activity, not uniform activity, but catastrophic activity. Wade?
So another thing that I think we need to think about here too is, you talked about the canopy that went across the earth, or over the earth, around the earth. That canopy of water, we don't know how. We have an ozone layer now with several miles that block the effects of the sun.
Right.
But that canopy of liquid would have blocked
Way more effectively.
way more, yeah. And so you noticed before the flood that these people were living 600, 900,
900, almost 1,000.
Yeah, almost 1,000 years. But after the flood, it seemed like people started to decrease in age. So you wonder if, when that canopy went away, the effects of the sun started.
I think that's good speculation. We couldn't prove it, but I think that's good speculation. I really do.
Because I mean, there's cancer and stuff that the
Right.
sun causes.
Yeah. Tom?
Well, there's a number of different things that we go through to see from time to time. Almost everything that you talk about, you know, the change of water, or even the mountains, there's constant. You know, we look at continental shift and things, and you've seen these things where one continental plate's going under another. It's some mountains are decreasing, like the Appalachians, or you know, decreasing in size, and the Rockies are increasing in size, and things like that. So we've got some natural things, but here we had a phenomenon, back in the 1980s, Mount St. Helens, or was that the 90s? It was just unreal.
What happened instantly?
Instantly, in just
Yeah.
a matter of time. And large canyons were crying out.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
happened almost instantaneously.
Yeah, I think, as we said, I think the earth today looks way, 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 way different than it did pre-flood. Jacob and Nikki are coming back from a trip to the Grand Canyon. How'd that Grand Canyon get formed anyway? Well, again, if you used uniformitarian kind of, it would take eons for erosion to cause that Colorado River gorge called the Grand Canyon. But if you had a flood, like is described in the days of Noah, that could have happened in days. And you know, even geologically, in the high plains of the United States, it was pretty well known to be like a pool there, and pre-flood, I mean after the flood, that pool of water that was held back in the high plains of the North America broke through in the Colorado River basin, and it's like a dam breaking, and all that water rushed out, and the Grand Canyon was formed shortly. Becca?
The downpour that would have come to actually fill the earth. 2 years ago, when I lived in California, I was in the town that that dam almost collapsed. The dam itself, the height of it is 770 feet, so you got to take down to the floor bed of the lake.
Yeah.
The water rose to 903 feet.
And the force of that is incredible.
It was, the spillway that was absolutely destroyed from top to bottom is just now, they're looking at opening it this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, the force of that water is just unimaginable. Dale?
When you stop and think about it, we always think it rains 40 days, it rains 49, but that's not the whole.
No, that
Water well on earth for 150 days, that's a half a year.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of weight sitting there on the whole earth, like you're talking about.
oh yeah, just the weight of the water would have caused
Water 6.5 pounds of gallon.
geology. The geological formations would have changed just from the force of the water. We'll talk more next week, but this was not a 40-day event. This was not a 40-day event. All right, thanks everybody.